It's commodities time now. We have Dumebi Oluwole joining us. Hi, Dumebi. Dumebi is a senior analyst with financial derivatives. Dumebi, so on Tuesday we talked about the Naira, and you did say we shouldn't expect. We had a rebound. I think we had a rebound the day before on Monday.
Yes.
So I think I was getting ahead of myself. But reality has since set in because since then we haven't seen any appreciation. It's been dropping. I mean, on NAFEX it was more than 1% down at the close of trade yesterday, and doesn't look like perhaps maybe the CBN will intervene one of these days. There you have it, NAFEX. Maybe we'll have a CBN intervention, which is not what we should be looking forward to, but maybe to give us a little bit of good news in the very short term.
I mean, I think it's somewhat always, I think economists oftentimes don't like to jump the gun. So even when we see some of these things happen, except if it has become a consistent trend, that we can say, okay, yes, you're likely to expect the trend. So well, that was more of like a blip. And that's why I tried to help you to help you on Tuesday to just anchor your expectations. Because again, but one thing I think is worth mentioning is that during, economic situations like this, these are the kinds of things that you would experience until the market eventually corrects itself, and we're seeing the country on a steady path of economic stabilization. So it's more of like a bumpy road whenever reforms take place, and chances that are that the Naira would, the currency in itself, for any country that undertakes any reforms, would see, hits left and right until there's a steady inflow of FX demand. And a very good case in point for Nigeria at this time is Egypt. So from the beginning of the month, or I think from the end of April up until now, we've seen the Egyptian currency actually gain to some extent, and this is after steady depreciations, even in April, just like the Naira as well. But there has been a huge influx.
Had this very interesting
Yes, that's where
deal.
I was going to, exactly. So that huge influx of foreign exchange, and the Egyptian the Central Bank of Egypt increasing its gold reserves has been able to help, first of all, boost FX supply liquidity and reduce the effect of money supply on inflation. So for instance, Egypt's month-on-month inflation as of March significantly declined, from positive, significantly declined. So we're seeing some level of correction or some level of steady path towards stabilization. And the outlook for Egypt right now is quite positive. So basically what I'm saying is, as long as we continue to, enact policies and the market sentiments towards Nigeria's FX market is positive, and we're seeing, an increase in this inflow, so meaning that market sentiments are backed by an increase in investment, we will see that support the currency. So again, it's just a bumpy road till we eventually get there, and this is a symptom of reforms.
It would remain a bumpy road until they are intentional, because even the Egypt we're talking about, they were very intentional, about their approach. They didn't just get the inflow, they did connect it to, I think, infrastructural projects and all of that. So ensure that those projects will give investors the confidence that, you're backed and there's going to be an inflow. So in our own case, I mean, we can't just say, oh, yes, we have reforms. I know the guest on Sunrise Daily was talking about the monetary and the fiscal. It's not a new conversation and all of that. And also the fact that inflation in Nigeria is actually supply push. So, I mean, even when you have all of the beautiful reforms, we're still going to look at the supply. We're talking of commodities, for instance. We're talking of food inflation that is over 40% now. Do we see intentional steps to, say, okay, yes, let's suffer it for 6 months because it takes 6 months for cassava to get off and be harvested. Do you understand, for instance, there's a plan. By the end of 6 months, this is going to be over, or at least it will start getting to the end. I mean, for me, that's the worry.
And you're very right. I really think you should start being an economist at this point. But on a more, I would say, economic note now, and you're very right, you're very spot on with everything that you've said. And that's where you see a lot of economists coming out to say we do need a bit more harmony between fiscal policy moves and monetary policy moves. The CBN is doing what it needs to do, to be very fair. We've seen an increase in the monetary policy rate by 600 basis points. That's a lot of strain on businesses, although it is still the trade-off that we have to make, where we're saying we want to stifle, we want to curb inflationary pressures, but at the expense of increasing the borrowing cost for businesses. So while that trade-off is happening, there should be supporting fiscal policy measures. And unfortunately, we haven't really seen that happen on the fiscal side of things. Insecurity is still a problem. Oil production is still being pervaded by theft and vandalism. And we're seeing that reflect in the numbers. Natural gas production, we're still hearing a lot of things about gas flaring. Production is also not ramping up, even though there are a lot of
minerals.
Exactly, mineral resources, and even though we're seeing a lot of positive, attention towards, for instance, our lithium sector, our copper sector, we're also seeing that even towards natural gas. But unfortunately, we haven't still done the good and dirty job at the same time to make sure these investment opportunities are long-lasting. And to some extent, this, when you look at Nigeria's confederation, you do realize that some work, or a lot of the work, rests within the states. So there was a time I did some analysis and I realized that a lot of states in Nigeria are still heavily dependent on FACT disbursements from the federal government. And until states do realize that they can actually build some level of comparative advantage with resources that they have absolute advantage in, we will still keep having these conversations, simply because the job of boosting, of catalyzing growth by creating an enabling environment for businesses to thrive does not only rest on the federal government. State governments also have the resources, and if they do what is necessary, and a very good template for this is the United States. You see states like Texas, California, everybody, New York, trying to ramp up investments in their states, attracting labor, attracting investments, attracting businesses by doing the job.
I know you, there's that list. What's the list that, the federal government is controlling some of the resources, in the states. So that hampers, their movements and all of that. Perhaps there'll also be a need for the lawmakers to look at
maybe some revision might be worth it. But again, it just tells you how much of resources are just, lying there, and we're not tapping into those resources. And there is that need for us to do that, especially when we reopen or we deepen the conversation about economic diversification, and we look at it from, bottom up. Right? Even though there are a lot of issues happening at the top, for instance, and I keep saying this, especially
and you have the VAT reform.
Exactly,
that
is happening. Then you also consider the landmark demolition that also happened, and you look at how disincentivizing that would be for new entrant investors and existing investors, simply because of how it happened. Right? So it's a huge blow to the fact that we are trying to attract investments into the country now, and then we're going ahead to do that. So there are a lot of counterproductive and counterintuitive policy signals that are coming out of the country, and that is making investors very cautious and jittery. And I will keep saying this, the money that Nigeria needs to resuscitate itself, it's outside our borders. We're not producing enough, we're not yet self-sufficient, and until we're able to confidently attract investments, we'll keep having the same story.
All right, Dumebi, well, Nigeria is our country. We have to be passionate about it.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's take a break again. When we come back, another issue that concerns your money. Yes, so stay with us.